Hello, folks.
Myself so they can hear me too.
I do look like a giant bed sheet. That's all right.
Oh, well, we've got six people. I mean, I know we're three of them, but...
And I still have no idea. Like, if I go into the chat and have it tell me what users are in the chat, it's just me. Even though the two of you have posted things. But it says 6 viewers. Hey, Shane Olsen.
Yeah, if you are you doing, you're checking in like
no,
OBS?
No, that's in Twitch.
That's in Twitch.
The dashboard. The numbers are just so inconsistent. So I just figured, the handful of people that are there, great, we'll engage with them and if they speak up.
Mm-hmm.
My shirt and my name do clash. I'll have to wear something so that you can read. There, now you can see my Twitter handle.
So Shane Olsen Art knows you. Came over here from your Twitter. So somebody saw your Twitter.
Oh, hey, somebody saw a tweet. I was just talking about how nobody uses Twitter anymore. Or that Twitter downgrades all the links so nobody sees it.
All right. So far as I can tell, many people still use Twitter. But they just don't see what you want them to see.
It's a headache. Yeah, right. Anything I want them to see, right? Actually, my D&D tips still do really well. But then you're like, hey, I'm writing a book. And I'm like,
I have not been a consistent Twitter user for some time. Like, I've been on Twitter since Twitter was new. But I think since grad school, I just didn't have the bandwidth. So, I might pop on once or twice a day. I'm trying to actually get on a little bit more, but I pop on once or twice a day. See if anybody's saying anything interesting. Occasionally, once or twice a week, an interesting thought will pop into my head. And it's like, that's not really for friends and family. That's not going to Facebook. So I'll throw it on Twitter and see how people respond. And that's about my usage. And quick last-minute communication with people who I don't have the ability to text, like getting Ish to come on tonight's episode. Well, Mike, how are you doing these days, besides new microphones and things?
Busy. I'm busy. I've got a Kickstarter in 2 weeks.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
So I'm spending a lot of time and energy and effort
weird. I've heard very little about it. Why hasn't it been all over Twitter?
I know. It should have been all over Twitter. Down algorithms.
What are you going to sell me now?
The Lazy DM's Companion, the third of the Lazy DM books. A book of guidelines and inspiration to help you run your 5e games. So things to make it a little easier to run 5e and a little more streamlined and story focused, and a lot of focused generators to help you fill in your own adventures and fill in your world. Intended to sit with you while you are preparing your game.
Well, I have. I think I've backed literally everything you've ever kickstarted, so I imagine I'll be on this one too.
It's the first time we're doing an offset print run, which is freaking me out.
So tell me what that means.
That means that people in Norway are actually making pallets of books that will then be shipped in cargo containers across the sea and then sent right to your door directly, rather than you going and ordering them from DriveThruRPG and getting a print-on-demand copy.
You're going to have a warehouse with pallets of books sitting around.
I have a warehouse with pallets of books.
You're paying for fulfillment and all that.
Nord Games has a warehouse with pallets of books. I am using Nord, yeah. So Nord has both services to help you manage your Kickstarter and services to handle fulfillment. Cobalt Press uses them for stuff, and other companies use them for stuff. So I am working with them to handle. But I'm still working with the printer and managing. They have a logistics guy, they have an operations guy there at Nord who handles a lot of that stuff. I think he actually lives overseas. Okay. And but boy, it's a different world, right? Yeah. And it's a scary one. So yeah.
Is it more? Is the margins better doing it that way than print on demand, or?
I won't know until everyone has their books, right? Okay. The tricky bit is they could say hey, it'll be $5,000 to ship a pallet of books from from Norway to the U.S. And you're like, great. And they're like, oh, we're sorry, it was 20,000. Right. And so you don't know until they're out. There's like lots of things with VAT. I'm really hoping to both not, I'm hoping to both not go bankrupt, and not anger every single Kickstarter backer at the same time.
Yeah.
Ideally neither of those, but obviously both of those would be bad.
And shipping overseas for the last year or so has been a cluster as well. So.
Yeah. Right. I mean, shipping period has been. Shipping everywhere it's been. But then it's all kinds of screwed up in all kinds of different ways, depending on parts of the world and everything like that. So, tricky bit is VAT, like people will get different quotes on what they have to pay to get the book into their country because it gets categorized differently. It is really, it's really, So anyway, that's freaking me out.
But it has the potential to have better.
But the book will be. Well, yeah, and the margins aren't actually what I'm chasing. What I'm chasing is quality, right? I want these will be the best. These would be the highest quality versions of these books. They should certainly be better than print on demand.
So
and they should less expensive overall.
So while I have backed, I think every Kickstarter you've had, I don't think I have a single physical product that you've published. So
yeah,
everything I have from you is in PDF. So the quality won't change for me, I imagine.
Yeah, well, in your case, and you have the other two. So in your case, you'll pay $10 and you'll get the PDF of the new book, right? Okay. And that's outstanding.
Sweet. So that'll be exactly what I want.
Yeah, and you'll enjoy it. It's gonna be
great.
I
even have you have one of them in audiobook?
I do. Yeah, this one won't be because it's almost all charts and tables and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, Return is in an audiobook.
I have it. I haven't listened to it, but I have it.
It's good. Yeah, people really enjoy the. People really enjoy it, the audiobook.
Good.
I have a longer commute now, so I'm definitely going to have to listen to it. I've read it, but sometimes it's good to hear it too. And
people.
Yeah. Well, and I find that's, I don't know. I've been doing this kind of stuff in the gaming community for so long now that it's rare that I hear anything that is a new idea to me. But there's a ton of ideas that have slipped onto the back burner and probably fallen behind the stove, and I completely forget about them. And so when I hear somebody say it, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was a good idea. And so that's where a lot of the value in reading blogs or podcasts or reading Mike's books really shines for me.
Yeah.
So. Well, shall we get started?
Yes.
Let's do it.
We've gathered some folks.
Let the fun begin.
Oh, we're supposed to have fun tonight?
I don't know. Hey, like compared to last time where I just argued about Frost Maiden for an hour?
Either that or Wang Chung tonight, one of the two.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll Wang Chung tonight.
Well, I have hit record, so whatever we say now, Mike will have to listen to Sam will have to listen to and edit out. Unless you want to start doing some editing for Sam.
Yeah. I'm all good here. I'm like, I barely listen to it after it's edited.
Oh. I don't listen to anything that I'm in. I trust
I'm one of those
Sam completely
horrifyingly egocentric people that can actually listen to themselves.
Yeah, no.
And not feel bad about it.
Honestly, I could probably stand to listen to things sometimes, but I am so far behind in podcasts that at every point in time for the last 20 years, I've never been caught up, that I can't afford the time of listening to myself ramble for an hour. I just got to move on and listen to other stuff. Especially lately, Sam has been catching up on D&D Brief and the World Tree Burns and the deep dive they're doing for Edition Wars on the DMG. So every episode is at its shortest an hour and a half, and some of them are 3 hours long. And he's been putting out 2 or 3 of them on the feed every week, and it's I can't keep up with my own show anymore. So
that's great. A lot of content.
It's fantastic. We get WotC game designer Dan Dillon DMing a game on our feed.
Really?
Because he
awesome.
He started DMing World Tree Burns before he started working at WotC, and so he's continued doing it.
Great.
All right. Well, we've been recording for a while, so say hi to Sam and we'll get started.
Hi, Sam.
So you know, I will occasionally hold up the timer so that you'll know sort of how much time is left. But we're not like making a thing of it. It's just for your knowledge. And honestly, if we go over the time, and we always do, nobody really cares anyway. Just so you're somewhat cognizant of where we're at and what we're doing. And I'm literally about to start, and Mike just got up.
Yeah, I'm done.
This is coming off his time.
I have reasons. I had to close the door. It's a big, complicated thing. I have to close the door, but can't close it all the way because the cats freak out. So I have to leave enough room for a cat to be able to make its way in, but not my wife hearing the whole game that she's playing in.
I see. I assumed you were going to get some pudding or ice cream or something.
Yeah, I was going to go get some ice cream.
Yeah. All right.
No, I'll wait till you're talking about your game before I go get ice cream.
That's fair. I honestly have very little to talk about, but that's always the case, right? So that's never stopped us from rambling for half an hour. Okay, I'll get started now. This is Behind the DM Screen. It is September of 2021. We are 3 DMs helping each other out and talking about our games, but I guess not usually in that order. I don't know. I don't really script for this show. I am Jeff Greiner, the normal Tome Show guy for most stuff. With me, as always, is Mike Shea. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
And not with us, as always, because Sam had something come up literally like a few hours before we were starting to record. And so we are lucky to have Ismail Alvarez joining us as our very capable substitute DM.
Esteemed guest.
Yes, esteemed guest. I mean,
glad to be here as usual.
Based on the 10,000 hour rule, I figure Ismail is clearly the best DM I know, because you run like 20 games a week, don't you?
Well, I'm at 8.5 right now, but
wow, a week.
A week, yes, a week. I say the 0.5 because one of them's every other week, but that's going to go up to 9 because they just found out at my new job that I do D&D, so now I'm going to do yet another student game for high schoolers this time, so it'll be crazy. A little different than the middle schoolers.
I'm tired just thinking about it.
9 games a week.
I thought I did 2, and I was like, man, I'm hardcore.
The funny thing is that it charges my batteries. Like, when I do it, afterwards I'm like, oh, right, I feel like I could be up all night.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I only play once a week, but only... That's twice what I used to before I moved here. So I play twice a week or once a week, and yeah, we get done at 10:30, and normally most days I'm exhausted and ready to pass out at the end of the day, and it's on a Friday, so I should be the most exhausted. And yet I finish the game, and I'm like, okay, now I got to go upstairs and lay in bed and read comics for like another hour, and not go to sleep till midnight, because it's energizing.
Yeah, we have a problem that our game is 7 to 10 on Wednesdays, and 2 issues with that. One is people come in a little tired because it's like you had a long day and you worked all day and you're coming in, and then like you're supposed to immediately go to sleep, right? Like after you're done, and that usually doesn't happen. We usually have to wind down for a half hour or so.
Well, and I suppose that's particularly problematic when you've got work the next day. At least I'm doing it on Friday, so we come in exhausted, but then like if I'm wired at the end of it, I get to bed at midnight and I can just sleep in.
Yeah.
So, anyway, shall we talk about our games?
No, I would actually just like to sit here and Twitch and just ask Ismail questions.
Right, even though you're literally talking to him.
Well, I don't want to interrupt the show by also just grilling him about how the hell you run 9 games.
Well, you realize that
do a whole episode.
I guess that's
right. Talking to each other.
I'll wait till
talking to each other about our games is literally like the entire premise of the show.
The whole point of the show. I have more questions than he could clearly fit into.
I thought there was somebody else in the chat asking him questions, and then I realized it's you.
No, that's me.
Of course it is. Okay, so I'm going to put our normal 15 minutes on the clock. At the request of my students, I've actually changed the timer sound, so you'll get to find out what exciting sounds it's going to make. But my 15 minutes has now begun. Not that we, care when we go over the time, because we consistently do. That said, my group hasn't played our normal campaign in about a month and a half. So we had something come up that we were going to do at one point. And I sort of looked at the situation and said, well, we've got I estimate that we have about 3 more sessions left in the campaign. But I also estimate that I am wrong about those estimates 100% of the time. It always takes longer than I planned. So I told, that's what I told them. And then a bunch of 3 of my 5 players are like, well, we're going on vacation for like a week and a half in Mexico in 3 weeks. So it's like, well, we only have 3 sessions. In theory, we could, finish the campaign in those 3 sessions, but we probably won't. And they decided, well, let's do other stuff then. And then just have a big final hurrah and finish off the campaign all at once, because the off and on thing, it takes you out of the game a little bit, right? You lose the thread of who your character is and what have you. So anyway, so that's what we did. We spent 3 weeks playing some other things. 2 of those sessions we played a little bit of Fantasy Age, which I kind of tied into to the setting. So it was Fantasy Age, but it was in the setting of their normal campaign. So they had their big mass combat battle of Elturel, right? So they were in a small town outside of Elturel dealing with a knight, a hell rider who had been wrongly accused of a crime and trying to clear his name. And I have these 3 little like mini adventures that Green Ronin has published for Fantasy Age, and each one of them is like this. Each one of them it feels like it should be like, I don't know, half a session or so. It's only like 3 or 4 encounters per adventure, and then the whole thing's over. So I'm like, oh well, I'll get all 3. We'll space out the levels just right. We'll get a little bit of a taste of Fantasy Age, and we'll go through all of them. And then character creation took like 4 times longer than I expected. And so we barely got through half of the first of those short little adventures, which then left us very little time. And I just skipped straight to the 3rd one at the 2nd session, which involves going to an old mining town that's largely abandoned because monsters keep coming out of the mine and attacking people. These strange, aberrant monsters coming out of the town and mine and attacking the miners. And that largely we did a really abbreviated version of as well to even get through it. And it was a really tough encounter because they were a level lower than they were supposed to be for that adventure. It was a decent little taste. It didn't end in a real satisfying way, that 2-session sort of story arc. But they enjoyed the setting. They enjoyed the system. They were, Fantasy Age is a really great system to play in. It's the same as the Dragon Age. I think, Mike, you've played that before, haven't you?
As a role playing game. I played Dragon Age, a computer game. Right, but no, I've only played it once or twice. I know, like Enrique Bertrand, I think, ran it for a while. Like that was his sort of decompression from 4E. Was playing Fantasy Age and playing Dragon Age, and people that play it really like it. I think it's got a lot of really cool.
He's the one who introduced me to it ran it for me for the first time at Gen Con one year. And I thought you might have been at that game, so that's why I thought maybe you played it before. But
maybe, yeah. But I think I've only played it.
So I played it once or twice then, and then I bought into Fantasy Age when it came out, and Titan's Grave and all that, which unfortunately we got Chapter 1 of, and that's it. For legal issues that Green Ronin and Will Wheaton have had with Legendary. And so, but Fantasy Age continues to be like a really great system. And I've played it with middle schoolers before. And the middle schoolers were able to, like a pack of 5 or 6 middle schoolers, we all made Fantasy Age characters, and it took like an hour. So I figured these 4 veteran players, they'll make characters. We'll be done in half an hour, and we'll be playing, and we'll have all night to roll dice and fight monsters or whatever. And then it just took forever for them to make characters. Ish, you looked like you wanted to say something.
No, it's just thinking about like any system that takes like longer than an hour to make characters. I'm just like, ooh, But
see, Fantasy Age really doesn't. I think part of it was they were really sort of hyped up that night and being goofy, and on top of that, I think So I also have the Fantasy Age Companion, which adds a few new races and some new options, whatever. But I don't have the book. I just had the PDF, which meant everybody had to wait on me to tell them what they needed to know and whatever, instead of being able to sort of pass a book around and use it when you need it and whatever. So the whole thing just took significantly longer than it probably needed to. I think the big mistake I made was that when I did it with the middle school kids, I photocopied a bunch of the character creation sections that you needed, and then just passed them out to people as they needed it, and that worked really well. So anyway, it took a long time. It was fun. We had a good time. The system is fantastic. Everything runs on a 3D6. I don't know how familiar you are with the system, but everything runs on a 3D6. It's basically the D20 system, but with a 3D6. And then if any of the 3 dice are doubles, then you have one die that's a different color than the other 2 dice, and that's your stunt die, or in Dragon Age RPG, I think it's the dragon die, and it allows you to do these like crazy cool stunts, which sometimes are just like you do more damage, but sometimes it's like, and then you can do a second lightning attack, or you can, so you can do all these strange things. And there's tables for combat, and there's tables of stunts you can use for spells and exploration and social encounters and all kinds of stuff. So they had a really good time with that, and then those 3 players went away to Mexico for a while. As I understand it, they just got back a few days ago, so we're raring up for gaming again. And then me and one of the other players got together the last 2 weeks and just played board games and card games. He's a big board gamer and just brought things over, and I let my kids stay up late and hang out down with us. So we had 4 players, and we just played card games and board games and had a good time for a couple weeks. So that's sort of what I've been doing for the last, month and a half of my game, or of my gaming group, which I guess kind of brings me to what I wanted to talk about with folks, is taking a break from a game and then coming back into it. Do you have any thoughts on how to do that well? The players haven't played their characters in a long time. They're decently high level. They're in the middle of Yithrin from Frostmaiden, so it's not like it's not like we had a nice clean break at the ending of one story arc and at the beginning of another. They're in the middle of the city. They've been there for like 2 sessions now. Who's got some thoughts on bringing a group back into the game after they've been away for so long? They've probably forgotten the threads of what the story was.
I have thoughts, but I'll let Ismail go first.
Yeah, so like I was being asked in the chat a little earlier, it's like, how do I keep things straight? I have most of my games, I have players who take notes, and I wasn't like some tyrant, like basically demanding that they do that. They started doing that on their own, and I think that was what let me scaffold so that I could have so many games. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but it's great because they will then either just hand me their notes, like if it's on an online document, or they'll be printouts or whatever, and we can just go over what happened last time. Usually a really good idea to just go over, even if it can be a little tedious, just like going, well, and then this happened, and then this, but those details really are helpful for fleshing out, like, oh, I remember this, and yes, I was able to do that, and oh, I had this spell, all of the little nitty gritty that makes sense from like a month ago. Then all of a sudden you have to figure out, like, okay, this is the direction we were going and what we were going to do with it.
Mike, you had thoughts?
Yeah, I've had this happen with some of my irregular games, right? I have like 2 regular campaigns that are generally weekly, and those stay on track most of the time. But like if we have a week off, I'll notice that people are like, man, I don't remember why we're here or what we're doing. And for some bigger games, like we had one where it was like every 6 weeks we'd get together and play. This was for a Princes of the Apocalypse game, and they would lose track. And I think what I would do differently in a situation like that is I would really try to think of each session as its own full game and sort of treat it like, what if it was a one-shot? How would you introduce it as a one-shot, still assuming where they were, right? You'd almost treat it like a hot start, right? That like you're going to run it like a one-shot game, but they're still like you're in media res. The only difference is the in media res is the fact that you played in this previous one, and then they'll go, oh, that's right, I remember that we were here. But if you and maybe you could even jump. So like if they were at a spot, like they went back to town or whatever, you could say like, no, now you're in the middle of it again. We're skipping all that town nonsense. You've already jumped a little bit ahead in the story, and you're now here, and you're getting jumped by a bunch of hill giants.
Which would work, but not really pertinent to our situation. So,
well, I mean, you're in the middle of a campaign.
We're in the middle of a campaign, and this break has not been typical. So the run in every session like a one shot doesn't really apply, because this is a rarity within the last 2 years of playing this campaign.
Yeah, but you could still run this one. Right.
Sure.
So you could still like almost think of it like a big chapter break. Right. And you've had this big break, and then you say, OK, it's now time for a new chapter. If you were starting the game over now, what would you be saying?
Let me tell you where we stopped, because I thought it was a neat place to stop, because I didn't realize we were going to be on such a long break.
Right.
I don't know how familiar you are with Yithrin at this point, but in the city, you at one point you can go to like the library, and there's this doddering, whatever kind of manic, what is he, Arcanoloth, running around searching for this book that's not actually there, that has the name that when you combine it with these other books, it like has the names of all of the Yugoloths in existence, so that the true names, so he can command them and whatever. And he has this awakened penguin creature running around as like his assistant, helping him with things. And so they were involved helping him search the stacks, because he asked and they don't know that the thing isn't there. And then at some point, and this is from the adventure, at some point the penguin thing like slips them a note saying, help me, like this guy's crazy and I can't get away. And that's where we stopped. The penguin like slipped one of the characters this note saying, please help, and it was clear that it wanted to escape, and so we finished on like that sort of a cliffhanger. Because cliffhangers are great places to stop when you're going to pick up the next week.
Yeah. Well, but I think cliffhangers are also an interesting way to start a session if it was fresh. Right? Like if you were bringing in brand new players and you wanted to start them in Yithrin and kind of start them in this situation, what would you do for them? Right? And you might still have that where like you could just sort of rewind a little bit, have the doddering Arcanoloth who's running around looking for a book, have the penguin hand them a note that says, help me. I'd probably put some kind of sinister angle on it, right? Like, what's the threat to the characters at this point? What's the threat to the penguin? Why can't the penguin just walk away, right? And does something else happen? Like, what's happening in Yithrin itself? I do this training session anyway, right? It's like, the idea of something happens, right? That something happens here. And when we talk about mine, I'll talk about how I'm going to start mine. But like, something can happen in Yithrin that sort of shakes the whole thing up. It's like in judo, right? You want to grab the other person and just shake them a little bit, and it just puts them a little bit off their game. And like you just want to shake the characters a little bit, shake the players a little bit, remind them that they're in a D&D game.
That's a thing I can do. So they're there hunting for one of the champions of the dark powers, the merged bodies that turned into a two-headed dragon of the soulless Castellanter kids. Became this, went together and with the powers of the dark powers became this giant two-headed dragon thing. That dark power I've changed the obelisks a little bit to be that they are capable of killing a god, right? So the dark powers want to kill certain gods and replace them in the pantheon, and that's why they've got their champions running around. And so, but it can't access the obelisk because it needs the staff that's in the tower that's all locked up, and it doesn't have the ability to get in, right? So I could have either what's the demi-lich's name, Irregular or something like that. I could have the demi-lich, or I could have the dragon do something that shakes the whole thing up. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, just earthquakes. right? Like it's a whole city under the ice. The whole thing could shift.
I mean, it's a flying city that's buried in the ice, right? Maybe the dragon's in there digging around, and the whole thing tilts the other direction.
Right. Something happens, right? You just want something to just put them off, put them on the balls of their feet.
All the books fly off the shelves and they bury them, and
yeah, something, right? Something happens, but that I think the general idea of like you're going to have to reiterate, where are they? Why are they there? What's their goal? And that's why I think like thinking of it like it was a one-shot game. That's what you would do in a one-shot game, right? Here's the start of your
thinking
session.
About the introduction like you do a one-shot, where you just instead of building it up, you just sort of lay it out because we don't have time to build it up.
Or instead of assuming they all remember that where they are and who they are and why they're there. I mean, I have this in weekly games. I regularly have it where they're like, "Oh yeah, that's right. We're on the island of Grimscall. Why are we here again?" And you're like, "The Codicil of the White." They're like, "Yeah, what's that again?" And you're like, "It's the scrolls that have the whole endless night." Oh, that's right. And so I have to,
Yeah.
I have to do that sometimes when it's every week, and so I would certainly have to. And that reiteration. Here's the goal. Here's who you are. Here's where you are. Here's what your goal is. And then boom.
Shane in the chat is talking about note taking and DM write-ups and what have you. I used to do the newsletter every week, and that just eventually, I don't know, after a year and a half, that got tiresome, and so now I do little NPC monologues. Just sort of checking in on things going on.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, and I think Ismail mentioned this, right? That so we have note takers. I have note takers in at least one. They were better note takers before. I might try to spark them.
Well, that's my situation too.
And I'm now playing in an irregular game, and the way to keep me off my phone is to take notes during the game. Right. And so I put them in a Notion notebook, and they're just bullets. It's very, 12, 14 bullets a session. Here's what we did. And it helps all of us. Like I share it so everybody can see it, and it helps all of us like, oh, that's right. Here's what happened last session. Here was the decision we made. Right. Here's where we're going.
I used to have at least two players that were actually, I think I had at least, I think all my players used to be pretty good at taking notes. And then the campaign went on for a while and they kind of stopped, and B, I think at some point I brought in a coworker that started playing with us as well, and he has a really good memory, and so like his memory was better than their notes, and so they all just sort of gave up taking notes, figuring Ryan will remember.
The only problem with that is like you can't look into Ryan's brain and see what where you could look at those notes.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. I remember one of the players before I joined the group, they were playing with a different DM, and they were playing Storm King's Thunder, and one of them was playing a rogue who, doing the sort of stereotypical rogue thing, was stealing from the party, but somehow was also the one put in charge of tracking the inventory. And so he had it in his notes where he was tracking the party inventory, and then he would actually go home after the session and use invisible ink and write in the extra stuff that he had stolen. So when the campaign was over, he was able to show on a black light, and here's all the other stuff I took. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think my there's a bunch of tips I have for like players. I've been thinking more, and people have been asking about like what are good tips for D&D players. And I've got a bunch, but one of them is take notes. Right? Like, if you're a player and you want to help everyone out, just take some notes and share them with your DM and share them with the other players.
Once upon a time, when I thought I wanted to take the time to do some blogging on top of the podcasting and the full-time job and everything else, I actually started a blog that was, in my mind, was sort of the player mirror to Your Sly Flourish. I remember. I did it for about a year or so, and then eventually I just couldn't keep up with all of it. So
sure, yeah, no one can keep up with the Sly Flourish Empire.
Well, I got a lot going on. Plus, I went to grad school, so that was pretty much my life.
Right, I got my doctorate in D&D.
You're right. It's pretty amazing that I was able to both work a full-time job, get a doctorate, and continue the podcast. So
yeah, that's all very true. I am now part-time without a
right
higher education degree. Yeah.
So anyway, my time is well up. I don't think anybody even heard the new alarm. But I heard it.
I still miss Darth Vader.
Yeah, I still have it. But my students didn't like the one that I had before because I use it in class all the time. Oh, you got 3 minutes to do this or 2 minutes to do that or whatever, right? But some of them were complaining like that's the alarm I use to wake up in the morning.
Yeah,
so
right.
So it drives me crazy, right? Yeah, exactly. So I switched it to the quacking duck sound. So
yes.
I gave them the option for Darth Vader, but they didn't like that one either. So. All right, so my time is long up. I want to let people know if you want to support the show and all the things we do here behind the DM screen and other things, you can go to patreon.com/thetomeshow and become a patron. Support us for as little as $1 a month and help me pay the bills and make the show possible. So that's my little plug. It is now Mike's turn. I got 15 minutes on the clock, Mike.
All right.
How's your game?
So I'm going to talk about. I'm playing 2 Rime of the Frostmaiden games.
I was going to say, tell me about Rime.
Tell me about what?
Tell me about your Rime of the Frostmaiden game.
Yes. So I'm running 2 different Rime of the Frostmaiden games, and nicely they have split into 2 different areas. So my Sunday group has gone on the whale and gone over to Grimscall, and they're now doing Grimscall stuff. But I talk about that show on my weekly D&D show, so anybody who wants to know about that game can hear about it elsewhere. Instead, I'm going to talk about my day game.
And by elsewhere, where should they go to hear those things, Mike?
YouTube.com/slyflourish, and you can find all my videos. I have 300 videos of weekly DM prep shows. So Dr. Flourish didn't go to 6 years of evil school to be called Mr. Flourish. So my Wednesday game, however, I don't talk about anywhere except here. So my Wednesday group, they got the hint. So I've been dropping hints to both groups, lots of visions and portents and people. The Duergar are building some kind of weapon in the mountains, and they heard that the Duergar were hammering on stuff, and then all of a sudden the hammering has stopped, right? And then they're like, the Duergar were stealing all the Chardalon from the stem, but now that they stopped that, so now they're not doing it anymore. And then they're getting visions of huge beasts on chains that are moving, and crazy Duergar warlords going it's finished, right? And they're getting, so they know it's there, and one group's like, yeah, hey, let's go to Grimscall, right? And then they kind of head off. And the other group is like, I think it's time we went and figured out what's going on with the Duergar at Sunblite. And my Wednesday group made the...
So did the other group completely skipped the Duergar?
Yeah, they completely skipped it so far, and they are going to come back to 10 Towns in Flames.
Right, to the dragon having destroyed everything.
Yeah, so because one of the things that I'm doing is I'm treating the Chardalon dragon and Zardarok Sunblight stuff as a front. And that front is moving forward, whatever the characters are doing.
And when you say a front, you mean in the
dungeon world sense of you have these 3 big, usually 3 big villains that are all doing things.
Right. And
the villains in Icewind Dale or in the Rime of the Frostmaiden for me are, what's her name, the Frostmaiden, Oral is obviously one villain. Yeah, the main.
What's her name?
She's doing something. Zardarok Sunblight is doing something, and then the third one is really kind of Thrune, which is my Elder Evil that I've dropped in the middle of my Rime of the Frostmaiden game, right? And it's mostly the cult of Thrune and what they're doing.
And how do any of those attach to Ythryn, which is the end game of the campaign?
So Thrune is this Elder Evil that the elves brought in thousands of years ago. They realized they brought an Elder Evil into the world and that you generally don't want to do that. You can't kill it and you can't get rid of it, so they sealed it up in a big, massive iron sarcophagus or some kind of black iron sarcophagus and then guarded it for thousands of years. And then the Netherese showed up and said, hey, that's cool, give us that guy. And the Guardians of the Guardians of Thrune had a choice of either joining the Netherese and continuing their vigil, fighting the Netherese and getting killed, or leaving the Order. And they are called the Knights of the Black Sword.
Okay.
Which are the Knights of the Black Sword that you can find in Caer Dineval, right? That is a sect of knights that have evolved from the group that had stayed with the Netherese and became corrupt.
And then is that sarcophagus in Ythryn?
The sarcophagus is in Ythryn. It's at the bottom. It's sealed up in a great big vault at the bottom of Ythryn. And when Ythryn fell, it cracked open. And now Thrune's influence getting out. And that actually caused Icewind Dale to be frozen over before it was temperate. right? And now it's not temperate anymore, and it's because Thrun has this like super cold aura that goes that expands from him, and he's waking up. Right.
So did Thrun have anything to do with the crash? Like I could imagine that shard in Yithrin that dropped the city. I could imagine replacing the shard entirely and making it that sarcophagus.
I kind of screwed up and said that Yithrin fell when the Netherese all fell, right? And in the book, I don't think it's that way. It fell before.
Yeah, it was sort of a microcosm of what would happen later.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize, because I don't read. I'm not Sam. I don't read books, and like I thought it was the same thing. So I had already given that secret out that like this is what happened when Yithrin fell, when this was what happened when Netherese fell, and to me that still works. That it's like they thought everything was going to be fine, then it's not. It falls and crashes.
If anything, it works even better because you could completely replace that crystal or whatever it is with the sarcophagus.
I'm probably going to be replacing a lot of Yithrin anyway. Like I don't know what I'm going to keep and what I'm not.
I think I don't know. I like it so far. I think it works pretty well. But
yeah, it may all work fine. But I'm definitely So in my version of the game, in order to stop the Endless Night, you have to do two things. One, you have to somehow use the codicil of the White to end the spell. But as long as the power source from Thrun is still being channeled to keep the Endless Night, you also have to seal Thrun's sarcophagus. Right, and both those things have to be done. That way there's reason to go to both places. The Endless Night is still there until they do both. And that way you don't have this weird-ass thing like, hey, we solved the Endless Night. What do you want to do now? I don't know. Let's go to that crazy evil city.
Right.
Why? I don't know. Right?
Seems cool.
Seems cool, maybe. Right? Oh, look, a Demolich. Right? So, anyway, so this group, on the other hand, said, we want to go to we want to figure out what's going on with Sunblite and what's going on there. And I can't see. You're holding it off camera. There we go. Better. Yeah. It's no good when you're like over here. So they now I lost my train of thought.
The whole point was not to talk about it.
I know, and now it didn't work. It confused me. So so Sunblite and things I don't like about Sunblite. So they go to Sunblite Fortress, and like getting in. So you look at Sunblite Fortress, and there's one way in, and it's this switchback path that goes like 100 feet up and is completely defended by the fortress. Like if you look at the picture is like, there's no way we're going to go up that thing, right? Like a single Duergar with a snowball could kick our ass, right? And there's no option. And of course, if you read the book says, well, the guard that's actually guarding that is an ally of Grandolpha, and Grandolpha actually wants to get it. But the characters don't know anything about that. So my character's like, yeah, we're not going up that way. What other options are there? And they had heard from Nareth, because they had, or Dirth, not Dirth, the other one, Nildar Sunblite.
I don't know who any of the characters are anyway, so.
Yeah, so Nildar, so Zardarok is the main Duergar, and he has two sons, Dirth and Nildar. And they captured Nildar, and they asked Nildar, hey, what's this fortress about? And he said, well, there's a front door, but there's also an Underdark. It also has a passageway that leads to the Underdark. So they said, oh, we're going to go in through the Underdark. And I'm like, great, let me see what the book has on that. And the book's like, yeah, we don't cover that in this book. Right? It even says we don't cover that. This is beyond the scope of the book. And you're like, so the only other entrance into this place, you don't offer any.
Well, because they didn't see it as an entrance. They saw it as after you. Because like, oh, you're going to leave that way.
We're going to only have one entrance, and it's going to be the dumbest one you can imagine. Right? Like it's going to be this super defended switchback path that, like, again, a Duergar with a snowball could kill you if you were trying to go up it. So anyway, I ended up doing like a fun little miniature Underdark thing. They fought a Mind Flayer. I did like a small point crawl Underdark thing. So they got a little taste of the Underdark and then made their way in from the basement. So now they're coming in a totally different direction than the book expects. But it's actually cooler, I think. It actually worked out nicely. Cool. And my session tomorrow is going to... My strong start for the session tomorrow is they're going to hear a huge rumbling sound of a massive elevator moving in the center of Yithrin. And they're going to be like, what's that? And then if they go into the smith area, the big metalwork area, there's that central shaft. And one thing I'm adding is the central shaft has a huge elevator, because I don't think dragons can kind of fly straight up a shaft like that. I guess it crawls out of the shaft. I don't know. But I'm putting it on a big elevator, so they don't even know. They haven't seen it yet. And they're like, oh, man, whatever was on there is now going up to the top. We're going to have to go to the top. And my whole plan, and we'll see if this works out, is they're not going to make it in time, right? That they're going to go up there and they're going to face Zardarok, and Zardarok is going to be like, I've unleashed the greatest weapon that's ever flown, and I did it an hour ago, right? Like you're screwed, it's gone. Right. And then the party's like, oh my god, and they'll still have to fight Zardarok, and then they have to figure out how they're going to get back to 10 towns. And I'm not sure how I'm going to do that exactly. Like, I don't know. I kind of don't want to Deus Ex Machina their arrival back at 10 towns. And I'm thinking of, I have a couple of thoughts, and I know, Ismail, you've now run Frostmaiden multiple times.
Twice. Although to be fair, I kind of both times I just went completely off the rails about halfway through, so I did not run the hardcover for the second half of either of those playthroughs. But I used the 10 towns area very extensively.
Gotcha. Yeah. So my thought with there's a couple things I don't dig about the Shardalon Dragon. One, I don't dig this like timer event where you lose half the towns because you're slow, right? And I don't like that the Shardalon Dragon is supposed to be this huge weapon, and yet it's a perfectly balanced CR whatever encounter that level 7 characters can take on. When you're like, really, I bought the miniature and it's bigger than my cat, so like it should have more hit points than that. So I think,
and on top of that, like Icewind Dale 10 towns is not they're not a bunch of slouches. Like, they live in the harshest environment, possibly in the world.
Yeah, why do 5 people have to show up before?
Yeah, why do 5 people have to save the day? Surely there's other 7th level characters running around.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. So I'm thinking that it will have destroyed Dugan's Hole. I think that's okay. Like that I think is the fact that by the time they get there, it is on its way to. What's it called? Not good. East Haven, right? And they kind of like East Haven, but they're not super happy about East Haven. And then it's going to make its way to Caer Dineval and eventually work its way back up and hit the other towns. So we'll see how they get there. And I have a few possible ways that they could make their way back. One of them is that one of the characters we had in the group before had a temple that she could move from like Druid Grove to Druid Grove. And the idea that maybe the temple, if they could get to the temple, they could teleport back to Bryn Shander and then make their way back would be cool.
If it matters, there's actually that's not horribly inconsistent with the lore of the region as well. There was a grove to Maliki or whatever, because Drist is that, and that's how some of the companions sort of survived the time jump.
Yeah, I read it. Yeah,
oh, that's right. I forgot you read those novels.
Ketty Bree did her crazy druid magic and resurrected everybody. Yeah, so I was playing with that, and I think that might be kind of fun to bring the character in. The player isn't actually in the group anymore, so the character kind of became an NPC, and that would be one option. Another one is I could go with the go with what's in the book, where what's her name shows up, introduces herself, and says, "You can use my undead dog sled," and see if the characters dig that. The problem is, like, you don't want to put like 3 of these options in front of people and be like, I don't want to ride on an undead dog sled. That sounds terrible, right? And then it's like, well, then all 10 towns is destroyed. So I don't want to box them in with one option. And if maybe they have, I'm kind of hoping to leave it open a little bit and see if they can think of a way to do it.
And yeah, I might, if it were me, I would figure out what my 3 options are going to be to present to them, but don't like, okay, now you're in a hurry, here's your 3 options, but like seed it into the dungeon or whatever ahead of time, and they might run into that, and then it's up to them to think, oh, there was that undead dog sled, and there was this other, and sort of think through their options. It's a little hard
to do it now because they're already in the keep, right? Like they're already, they'd have to, it would have to be things that were right there,
that were closer,
yeah, and it's like I could foreshadow stuff like that. But the only one that I foreshadowed is that temple. And so, I don't know. I might end up doing that one. I'm not sure. I think I've got a couple sessions before. I got at least 1 session before I have to worry about that. And, so we'll see. And then, the other thing I think I'm going to add that would make more sense is that Dearth, one of Zardarok's sons, knew about the weapon and purposefully sabotaged it. Like he purposefully put something in it that made it weaker because he just wasn't sure. He was like, I don't know if I was going to use this or not, but just in case my father turned this thing on us, I'm ready to damage it or disable it. And Grandolpha knows that he's got this thing, And so if they can kind of work with Dearth and Grandolpha, they'll say, yeah, he released the weapon, but, you know, use this and shatter it, and it will damage you'll damage it. And that way, when they face it, there's a reason why it's not the equivalent of a CR-28, right? It's like, oh, it's been wounded. It's already damaged. It can't fly as fast.
The outer layer of armor was weakened, and you were able to shatter it, and it fell off in shards.
Yeah, so something like that, where they can, maybe it's her little model, right? If they damage her model, it actually damages the real one. It can't destroy it, but they can limit it, and then that might buy them some time.
DVS Sicarius in the chat and I are on the same page of thinking, oh, maybe we shouldn't have been such a lazy dungeon master and planned ahead.
Nah. Right, like, you know, meteors could hit at any time, so why plan 3 sessions ahead? I plan my next session, and I make sure that I got the things going on for that session. And I heard the duck, by the way.
I know.
I planned on that session and one session after. So yeah, that's where my game is. I have another kind of problem. So I've had a pretty regular group, and I've got 3 people that have been very regular.
So this is a third group?
This is my Wednesday group. So my Wednesday group has been consistent for like 15 years. Okay. Not always the same people, but 3 of the people in that group have now been playing there for more, like almost probably about 15 years, 12, 13, 14 years. But I've had a lot of turn in the other 3 people. I had a couple people that had been there for a long time, but they had other things going on in their lives and had to step away. I brought some other people in, and I've been having a lot of trouble with keeping people, and not, mostly because they've got real life commitments. Right. I've had 2 people that have like, hey, I've got kids, I've got to take them to soccer practice, I'm really busy, and so I have an on-call list of 6. Right, I have a list of 6 people I can call to fill in slots as they show up, and then I've got 2 that are regulars, right? But they're the 2 others on top of the other 3 that have been very regular. So I've got a group of 5 that's pretty solid, but 2 of the 5, they also have things that go on in their lives, right, and are probably in about 50 to 75% of the time. And I'm thinking I might have to switch to a more, not quite a West Marches-y style game, but something where I have a more of an expectation that people aren't going to be there the whole time. Mm-hmm. And that's been tricky. So yeah, it's been tough. I brought a guy on, real great guy. He came on as a regular, but then seeing the commitment and seeing what was going on, he's like, look, I have more commitments than I thought I was going to have. Right. It's been harder for me to go, so I need to go on the on-call list. I was like, damn, like I went through all the trouble. Well,
and
it's great. I'm very happy.
This is similar to the situation I had in my North Carolina group for 10 years or so, and my solution was I didn't want to do the troop style play, but I decided, okay, I want to have a group of about 5 for any given session, and whatever week it is, there's going to be probably at least 2 or 3 people because of commitments that aren't going to be able to make it. So I actually created a group. I always tried to aim to have a group of 7 players. Because at no point in time, or other than maybe the big finale of the campaign, are we ever going to have all of the players there? It just never happened. And so I just had more players than I needed in the group, recognizing that some of them are going to come in when they can, some of them are going to be there every week, and some of them are going to just pop in every now and then, and that worked out okay for us.
Yeah, I tried to do it with like 6 and 2, right? Mine was always like I wanted 6 regulars and 2 on call, mm-hmm. and then if anytime 2 of the regulars bowed out, I'm perfectly happy playing with 4, sure. Right? So a group of 4 is fine for me.
Yeah, that was always my strategy. If we had 4, we'd play. If we had 3, we'd do a one shot of Torg. Was usually our go-to.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I should probably have a fallback for a 3-person.
Torg is great for that because everything is like a one. Every adventure is a one shot. Everything is in and out. 3 acts and you're done. And yet it still kind of fits together. You can still play the same characters.
Yeah, so it's just been tricky. I think summer's been a thing, and everything else, and adults with lives is hard. So yeah, so that's been not. I mean, frustration's a bit extreme, but it is funny that I have like this list of 7 people. Like I'm probably gonna have 6 people tomorrow, Yeah, because I have my it looks like all of the 5 regulars plus one of my plus one of the people that's on call can come in, but that's been weird, and it's been weird doing that in the middle of a campaign.
Right.
It's like I think now I've had 2 or 3 people that have been introduced in the middle of the Icewind Dale campaign, including one who's playing a white. Yeah, so Dazan has a Krintas, his pet white. So yeah, so there's a what are they called? Arcane Brotherhood member, right. Dazan, and he's dead, but his simulacrum is still around, and his simulacrum has a white bodyguard, Wight, right. And named Krintas, and so we had a player jump in playing Krintas, and now Dazan's simulacrum is also dead, but Krintas is still out there, who he said is like undead Batman, right? Like he kind of like runs in and saves people and then flies out again. Right. So
yeah, no, I've always I don't know. I used to work really hard to figure out, somebody's here this week and they're not there that week and whatever, and come up with in-game sort of explanations for that.
Yeah, I
stopped doing that in 4th edition and just sort of said, you know what, they're not here, whatever, just hand wave it.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about it. Oh, they're back now. Okay, great.
Reasonable explanation is fine.
Yeah. I just stopped trying.
I agree. Yeah, like everybody knows, like the players all know what the situation is. So we don't have to bend over backwards to make the story.
Every now and then, if it's convenient, I'll be like, oh yeah, they stayed behind at Trollskull Manor and they're tending the bar or whatever. Because that's how the session begins, is leaving Trollskull Manor.
But it does mean kind of changing the style of the adventure you run, because like I have a player coming tomorrow and she's really only going to be there for that one session. I need to make that session entertaining enough on its own that it was worth only being.
And that's why I don't do that. That's why I would rather have too big of a group where only 2 people, where 2 people are always going to be gone, but it's a rotating 2 people that are gone. Because then there's still consistency. Right. Like everybody's still part of the campaign. They're there occasionally throughout the entire story. Yeah, I don't like the whole alternate thing.
I'm not running games for 7 people.
Well, but if the 7 don't ever show up, then you're not running games for 7 people.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
sorry. I was just gonna say, like, I did 9 for my Eberron campaign from I guess a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
With that idea, it's like, well, some people. You would be surprised how many times all 9 of those people show
I know. That's that's the nightmare. Like I would never want to invite more people than I'd be willing to run for, because when I do that, they'll all show. I've done it. I've had 7 show up almost by accident, where like I over invited, right? And like you just go, but it's like everyone's just having less of a good time because it's just too long and too busy and not enough screen time.
I ran an after-school middle school group that was 20 students in one campaign because nobody else could or would DM. So they would. We'd only get through two rounds of a combat every session, and it was 20 minutes, 30 minutes or more between turns. And they're 12-year-olds. They get bored and they get distracted, and then that makes it take longer. And it was we made it work, but it was not ideal.
Yeah, I want to hear about Ismail's game.
Well, let's hear about Ismail's games. I want to let people know, if you want to follow the Tome Show online, we have a Facebook, we're on Twitter, we have a Discord, which, if you ask in one of those other places, actually it's in the bio for Twitter. We are streaming right now on Twitch with an audience sort of chatting with us and asking questions that we keep interacting with. And then when I get around to it, I upload whatever we did on Twitch onto YouTube, so you can find old stuff there as well. So come check this out and track all that stuff. And it is appropriate to talk about our social media because Ismail is our official social media manager.
Yes, absolutely. So I love being the social media manager, and it's definitely a good time, and it's really cool. I'm glad, actually. It's funny that you bring that up, because the Discord is a really great place to be, where we talk about what everything is happening with like people's games. I think every Monday, if we're not seeing an edition war, then we're like what everyone has been up to. But like I think I said this on Discord, I had this like musical chairs thing happen where a bunch of my games got shifted over. And so it's like the Tea Party and Alice in Wonderland, where like I'm just trying to figure out what game's going to go in what slot. But I won't go over all of 8 of my games. Otherwise, I'd like, you know, it would be enough for like 3 episodes.
8.5. Don't forget the half.
I run 7 of those. Like 1.5 are ones that I actually play. But I'm going to only go over 2, but I'm going to talk about a couple of other things really briefly. The Icewind Dale games that I ran were both for really high-level campaigns. So like everybody was like level 10 or 11. And so leveling everything up for them instead of just starting at level 1 was really interesting but really fun. So if anybody's like, oh, how do I challenge people because everything's like so low, I've got tips for you, but we won't talk about that right now. So the 2 games that I will talk about are, I want to start talking about the Lost Mines and Old Kingdoms. Basically, I just started with the Lost Mines of Phandelver, but then I brought it into the Palladium fantasy world, which it's like, that's what I cut my teeth on like way back in the 90s. It's still kind of like goofy like Rifts is, but you know, part down to the Palladium fantasy kind of setting where it's more fantasy.
But you're using 5th edition D&D in that setting.
Yeah, yeah, because I'm gonna be brutally honest. I can't stomach the Palladium fantasy system. It is like clunky as clunky gets. But I love the setting, and it works perfectly with 5th edition. I've had no complaints, no problems, no issues. But Lost Mines and Old Kingdoms was a game I actually started running like 3 years ago. And it went really well. Everyone was super happy with it. And then just life happened. And we stopped 2 years ago. So we ran it for a year. There's this 2-year hiatus. And then we came back about like a good 3 or 4 months ago and started running again, which has never happened. Like that's always been my pie in the sky dream of being like, well, we should come back to this game eventually. It was a lot of fun. Feel like we should get some closure, and this is the first time ever that I've ever gotten to do that. So I'm so happy. We're like 2 sessions away from being able to like basically finish it out and get closure and do the whole shebang. But it was almost like a session 0 all over again, bringing everybody back and talking about everything that had happened and going over old notes. And it was good. It felt good doing that. I think like if it was a bigger group, because it's like 4 players, and they're really good about being there every time. But if it was a bigger group, I think it'd be like, well, and then you did this, and then you did that. It would be a lot more untenable. But with 4 people, it was really good of just having that like campfire feel of like, no, don't you remember? And this happened, and you were able to accomplish that, and it was this really cool scene where you managed to do this. So it was fun just kind of going down memory lane of like 2 years ago, happier times, but like figuring out where we were and then hitting the ground running the next session was a lot of fun. And so a lot of this has been like, I started the game by running Lost Mines of Phandelver. I kind of extrapolated by saying like, Phandalin is next to like this custom little area that I created. And then I just plucked all of that and put it into the Palladium fantasy world and built out from there. And there's a lot about that setting that I really like. A lot of the kind of conceits and crazy gonzo stuff. Like there's like these Cthulhu beings that have been put to sleep and they're always threatening to wake up and destroy reality, or there's all of the various different like religions and so on. But the group right now has basically been chasing this lich all across the continent and is trying to keep him from like reawakening one of these like Cthulhuid beings to destroy reality, because he was basically like a doppelganger and persecuted his entire life until he became a lich. And he's like, well, everybody treated me terribly, so this is my revenge on everyone, and everyone's going to feel sorry for the fact that they treated me badly when reality ruptures and everything. So now they're like, they're flying an airship to where it's all going to happen, and they're going to have their big final fight fairly soon, and that's probably going to take a couple of sessions. I'm kind of lucky that it's all happening online, because it's easy to keep all of that flowing. I think I was going to say earlier about the what do you do from session to session to keep things fresh. And, you know, I would used to have to take pictures, thank you, of the maps to be like, okay, this is where everything was arranged last time, because nobody could afford to keep a whole battle map on their kitchen table, so that we could just come back to it the next week. So obviously having Roll20 is really good to just, everything's just static there.
Are all your games, not all your games are on Roll20, are they?
No, although for a good portion of the pandemic they were. I was in the middle of my Eberron game, and the pandemic hit, and we started very gradually moving on to Roll20, and those were growing pains, and you know, that's maybe a conversation for another time. We actually had a couple of episodes where we were talking about, like, you know, how this is how you do Roll20, because I think so many people went through that trial by fire of learning Roll20.
It wasn't even like podcast episodes, but we streamed it because I desperately needed to figure it out, and it's hard to get started. Now, once you jumped on and just showed me a few things and got the ball rolling, then it was really easy to sort of pick up and go with. But it took a while. I don't know that I ever would have gotten there on my own at the beginning.
And yeah, like I had been on Roll20 for like a year and a half prior to that, and so it was a lot of just muddling through that. Like, had I not done that, I would have been just as lost as you probably. And with like at that point, it was like 4 games that I was running. The pandemic obviously like kind of ballooned that out. Gosh, there was something I was going to say about that whole thing about them going to that final battle.
Sorry,
so the Eberron game that I was running previously, that's kind of the thing I was saying is I had this one giant battle that like took place. It was like this circus, and they were fighting a shadow dragon, and it was crazy stuff. But it took like 3 games to play out this whole battle, and it was actually really epic. It wasn't like one of those that drew out, and it was just like taking pictures and remembering where everything is. But I say that because this huge epic battle is going to probably take 2 sessions, and it'll be all online. And that's just, it's going to be so much easier to just keep track of everything that way. But that one's going to end probably in the next 2 sessions, I hope. Someone's going to run a game of Lancers in between, and we're probably going to start playing Heavy Gear after that, unless we like fall in love with Lancers and decide to do that.
So what is Lancers and Heavy Gear?
So Lancers, I don't know a lot about, because one of my players is like, hey, I just got this as a gift. Can we try it? And I'm like, cool. Lancers seems to be this kind of like everybody pilots giant robots, and it's very kind of stylized, and it's very like genre driven. So it's kind of like you're the cool guy who rides the giant robot that's super fast, or you're like the big tough guy who has like the giant robot that can't be moved.
So it's Gundam the RPG. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. But Heavy Gear, on the other hand, I have done so much Dungeons and Dragons over the last 3 or 4 years that I want to do just a little bit of something else, and I love Heavy Gear. I've been a huge fan of DreamPod 9 for for probably about a decade. And I want to get back into that setting and run just a good old-fashioned, they don't support the line anymore, but a good old-fashioned 2nd edition Heavy Gear game. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm poring over old books and just like having a nostalgia fest. Gosh, there was something I was going to say about that. My mind's been racing a mile a minute. But that's where. Oh, I was going to say that I saw on Roll20, because it keeps track of how many hours you've played, and I'm like at 2,500.
Wow!
Just on Roll20. So there's like verifiable, like I've been at that for that long on Roll20. But that's that game. Like I am really proud of that game, because it came back from a 2-year hiatus, as I mentioned, and that's like you never hear that. Like I think that's the unicorn that like a lot of groups chase, of like, oh man, that game was good, and we almost.
Well, usually, yeah, if a game takes that long of a hiatus, it's probably gone, right? It's faded, and you'll never get back to it.
Mm-hmm. People move away, or they move on. They start role playing and all that business. But I was lucky enough to keep in contact with all of these people, and 2 of them are like friends from high school that like they were the ones I started role playing with, so that was really fun. My second game, and I know I probably have somewhere in the vicinity of 5 minutes left. So I've been on this huge kick. I was 10 seconds. I've been on this huge kick of playing games in the Palladium Fantasy setting, using 5th edition rules. So I'm not going to talk about my other game yet. Maybe I'll do that sometime in the future. But it's a huge, weird mashup. I'm just going to give you the premise of that game. I'm not going to talk about of the Palladium Fantasy setting with the Rise of the Rune Lords, adventure path using 5th edition rules, and I've been loving it. I'll talk about that another time. But then my third Palladium Fantasy game in 5th edition is one that I call the Cursed Fen of the Old Kingdoms. These are 2 games that I've had running in the Old Kingdoms of the Palladium Fantasy world. But I'm really proud of this game because the premise to it is that everybody starts out cursed by the big bad guy, and that's how they got, like, they don't meet in a tavern. They start out in this, like, ancient elven village that's, like, desiccated because it, too, is cursed. And so it's like an Ewok village, but, like, everything's dead. And so they are trying to figure out, like, who cursed them, why have they been cursed, how do they get uncursed? And it's been this kind of journey of figuring things out. One vital thing that they learned in the last 10 sessions is that whenever they uncurse something by the big bad gets to show up as their past persona and fight them. And it's this kind of like magical manifestation. It's almost like an illusion, but it has like some punch to it. So they have to fight the bad guy at like the different developmental stages of that bad guy's life. And so they're not just like, oh, we'll just cast Remove Curse when we get it. They're like, oh shit, every time we do this, sorry, I should have said that bad word. Every time we do this, we're going to have a fight on our hands, and it's not going to be easy. But also, I had a really cool thing happen, which is this group of players. We ran the Icewind Dale campaign with them and concluded it. One of my players had to leave. He's like, I have other things I got to pursue. I really love this, this game and this group, and I want to come back eventually, but life is too busy right now, and I have to go and do that. So I was like, that's great. You've always got a spot at my table. But about 2 or 3 months ago, he's like, hey, I want to come back, but I only have like 3 or 4 weeks to play with. Would you let me come in as like a character that you can like play with for 4 sessions and maybe do something really interesting? And what we did with that is I made him be a barbarian, but his ability to like rage and do barbarian stuff comes from possession. And so there's like a demon inside him that lets him rage and do all this crazy stuff. So he's like, hey, I have amnesia. I need your help. Like, something killed my entire village and I need to like find revenge. The only memory I have is that there's this shrine that will remove curses, and it will repel evil. So you don't have to worry about like whatever consequences. And somehow he knows about that, and that didn't make them suspicious, which I was great. I was happy about. But he's like, let's go there, and we can help each other, and we can remove all these curses and everything. And they're like, yeah, great. So they go with him to remove the curse, and they like fight these like bad guys to get into the church. And this all takes the course of like 4 sessions, and so this was his last session being there. And it all worked out perfectly to where the possession kind of took form of like this big shadow demon, and he started fighting them, and they were like, oh no, and we can't fight our friend. And I really was prepared for them to just beat him to a pulp and not care about the fact that because he was only there for a couple of sessions. Like, I didn't think they'd like develop a kinship, but they did, and I was really happy with that. And they figured out like the shadow demon was like invulnerable. They couldn't hurt it with anything. I was trying to like make them hurt him, and they didn't. So that was kind of cool. And so I let them do all of these weird little like mini games in the middle of this combat, avoiding him, to basically remove the demon and like slay it and banish it. Nice. But in doing so, this was all pre-planned. In doing so, he died because the only reason he was alive was the shadow demon brought him back to life. and they learned that he had previously been cursed by the big bad guy. We'll call the bad guy the Pontifex. But the Pontifex had cursed him, and he died while under the curse. And what they learned is that when you die and are cursed by the Pontifex then gets to raise you like a zombie and use you anyway. Well, like you're a puppet at that point, and that's what he was. He was a puppet used by the Pontifex to like lure them into this trap, which they managed to survive. But the Pontifex is like, I'm tired of these guys. They're ruining my plans. I really need to nix them. So he sent this guy to infiltrate them and use as a puppet to do all this stuff. And so at the very end of the session, they were like, oh, damn, if we die at all, we're gone. There's no resurrection. There's no raised dead. Like they know now that they will be gone and under the control of the Pontifex. So that has raised the stakes considerably. That was yesterday, and we had a lot of fun, and everybody was like super happy with the way that it turned out, and it was like suitably dramatic, and everybody was just like super happy to see the old player come back and get to do stuff, and it was kind of a slam dunk all around.
So before while we were introducing the episode tonight, Mike was grilling you in the chat instead of on mic. About running 8.5 games and how you do it. So, Mike, do you have any additional questions for Ish?
So for the sake of the show, I guess a few questions that I've got. Like one for me, like where do you get all the material to run that many games? Like where do you harvest?
So I said
harvest the material for so many games.
But I'll extrapolate. But it really is the Jeff Greiner method of I just take I take the peanut butter and the chocolate and I mush them together and I make the Reese's peanut butter cup. But like you saw, the other game I didn't quite talk about was like Rise of the Rune Lords. But then I'm putting in Palladium Fantasy because they have this whole thing with fire giants. So that's perfect. I draw that in. And I use, of course, the 5th edition rules because I'm like super comfortable with them, and that's like the most important thing for me and the players. There was a point at which I did. It was something like Out of the Abyss, but I brought in elements of Dragon Heist, and then I mixed in a little bit of Descent into Avernus. And so every so often I'll just get this wild hair of being like, I really, really want to run a game that uses these 3 like weird disparate elements, and I start putting together material, and like from there it's kind of like this big bang. It's like this collision of like weird energies just kind of writes itself, and it's the connecting the dots between the things that should not be connected to, like it kind of like writes the story in my head. And a ton of it, because I run 7 games right now, is like a ton of it is just super improv and playing off of my players. And I'm fortunate to have players that I can like really riff off of, and just they'll bounce really good ideas at me, and then I'll bounce them back at them. But when I can find the spare time, which is not a lot these days, I will just dive into my really messy Evernote notes and just start writing like, all right, in this next session we're going to do this. Or I'll get this like random idea at like midnight, when I'm trying to go to sleep, and just like, oh, I guess I better get up and start writing notes. And just put in like, this is a really good idea for like how to handle this villain or this NPC or this storyline, and just start writing. And then like, usually I'll sit down at the game and like, skim my notes for about 5 minutes and go, all right, this is how we're doing it. And then just boom. But it's,
I find I do a lot more of the like outlining prep, bullet pointing sort of, these are the major events I imagine to happen at this session sort of prep. In like the first half of a campaign, because I'm establishing so much and I don't want to mess up like all these story elements that I'm introducing, whatever. But then once all the story elements are sort of out there, and it's just a matter of seeing how it all sort of swirls together and plays out and whatever, I find that I just completely stop my prep almost entirely, other than just pulling the minis I need for combats that I expect to happen. That's all I do for prep anymore, because like the stories are done. Like now it's just playing it out to see how they're going to stop it or defeat the big bads.
Yeah, and to show like the madness at my method, like the Icewind Dale game that I ran for the group that I'm now doing, the Cursed Fen, where everyone's cursed. That one started as a Curse of the Crimson Throne, another Paizo adventure path that I put into Baldur's Gate. That of course I was running with 5th edition, and we ran that whole thing. And everybody wanted to keep going, and that was why I was like, well, Icewind Dale just came out. Are you guys cool if I just run that? And we can kind of like use that to like as a launching board. And so everybody was like super established at that point, except for one player who came in. And I was able to then to kind of, I just leveled everything up. And I've been learning the precious art of like making enemies super hard without making them like super deadly. But it's tricky, and it's not for the faint of heart. But we got through that entire Icewind Dale campaign. But like the latter half of that is like unrecognizable from the hardcover, and just because they kind of took what they wanted to and ran with it, and I loved it every moment of them doing that. And that started a thing that I was doing where if I was running 2 or 3 games in the same universe, like I had another Icewind Dale game happening, I would have things happen that would affect the other games. And that is probably one of my favorite things to do, because that writes so many like intricate little plot lines of like, oh, they stole that Tarask scroll, so now you can't have that. And then the group that wanted the Tarask scroll is like, oh my god, what are they even going to do with it? And then the group with the Tarask scrolls, I don't even know what this is. I'm just going to put it in there.
And I find some of the love, like I had... My players in my campaign were really excited about finding a wish scroll, and they talked about it for several levels, and then they actually found one, and one of the players sort of snagged it and won't give it up, and the other player is the one who really wanted it, and they were really looking forward to like, I'm going to get a wish, and it's going to be awesome, and they've had it now for like, I don't know, 10 sessions, and haven't even talked once about actually using it. Like, then what was the point? Okay, fine. So they're weird that way, right? They get really into a thing, like a scroll of Tarask summoning, and then maybe it doesn't matter.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, unless you have any questions about my wacky compulsion to play games in any amount of free time that I have.
No, that's awesome.
I'm good.
All right. Well, we have been chatting for. I got too many windows open. I didn't open my second screen tonight, so we've been chatting for. It's been an hour and 15 minutes. That's not too bad for each of us talking for 15 minutes, right? That's how time works.
That's not time good.
Three people talk for 15 minutes. That's an hour and 15. Yeah, that's perfect. Uh-huh. So, but I think it's probably time to go ahead and call that the end of the episode, if that's cool. So we will do that. I thank everybody for being with us, gentlemen. It's been fun. Those of you in the chat, thank you for joining us on the Twitch. That's been super fun. It's a good time. And we'll do it again next month. Theoretically, Sam will be back, but if not, we know that Ish somehow runs 8.5 games and can still show up for a podcast with 30 minutes notice. Can make it happen. So
miraculously, Tuesday is the one day I don't have a game.
Well, that works out because we normally record on Thursdays. So, all right, very good. All right, well, this is fun, and I think we're done. So, say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye, guys.
I think I normally have like a spiel at the end, but I have no idea what it is. So I lost the thread tonight. So the stream is still going. The recording has stopped, however. So if you want to talk to the folks in the chat, you can still do that. They were asking, and I was asking what heavy gear is, and then you talked about how you used to play it a lot, and it was great, and you love it, but you never really said what it was. So.
Yeah. I mean, Heavy Gear, it's hard to explain, but I'll try and do it for hopefully the people who are had asked are still here. But it's like this super futuristic game. It's like the year like 8,000 or something. I have to go back and look. But Earth has like colonized planets that are like many light years away. They use Tannhauser gates, which is a thing that like I want to say is like an old sci-fi kind of trope. And so they went and they colonized this planet, and they were like, this is going to be Earth's new hope. This is going to be great. And then all of a sudden, contact with Earth like stopped. All of a sudden, there's like no word from Earth. Earth was like radio silent. They couldn't use the Tannhauser gates. Like it was weird. They were like, oh damn, what are we going to do? And so life just continued on this planet called Terra Nova, New Earth. And the people had developed like these giant mechs that were like, oh, we're going to use these for farming and terraforming and all this good stuff. And of course, like things happen, they descended into civil war, and it's like, oh, these giant robots we have are now great for fighting each other. And so they fought each other for a really long time. It was like literally this North versus South kind of situation. And eventually they stopped fighting because then Earth came back with like super advanced technology, and Earth was like, hey, that's great that you guys have been, chugging along this entire time. We're going to recolonize you. And so the Terra Nova was like, no, you're not. And so then that was a big war. And that's kind of where the setting starts. There's like a really cool set of books that are like, okay, if you play in this timeline, this is what's happening. And then you fast forward to like way forward in the future where they've repelled the Earth people and are like back to their old shenanigans and like all this espionage and whatnot. That's a super simplification of it, but it's really one of the most well-written settings for being like this weird futuristic robo jockey game.
The books have like this really sort of like 90s cover art sort of aesthetic. I'm looking at the store. Who's the publisher? DreamPod 9 store.
It's DreamPod 9. Yeah, and like I'll tell people the Heavy Gear Character Compendium is my favorite role playing book of all time. I own 2 copies. I might even have 3. But the level of characterization and interconnectivity that they do, there's like a whole system where they measure people by chess pieces, and obviously it's like a pawn is not super important, but you get to like knights and rooks and kings, and it's like that's how important they are to the setting. And it kind of helps you too as a game master of being like, oh, I better not let my players interact with like this king level person, because that like they could kill them and then that would like throw everything into disarray. Or do, but then know what you're doing. But that's my Heavy Gear spiel.
Right on.
Very cool.
Mike, I think Shane asked a question.
Oh.
When you come up with 10 secrets, you say you come up with 10 more for the next session. I'm thinking those secrets would turn into story threads. So wouldn't you keep some of them if you have any thoughts? I
get asked this question a lot. Like, what do you do with the old secrets? And I say, I throw them away, and people go, oh my God. But I do. And yeah, often the thing is like secrets can be lots of different things. So they could be story threads. They can be all kinds of things. They could be little patches of history. They can be, information about a character's background that they didn't know, NPC traits or whatever. And I recommend tossing them between sessions, because if it is a story thread, you're going to remember it. And you'll put it in as a secret again. It doesn't mean you have to have entirely new secrets every time. You can pass a secret from game to game, but you don't need to like keep a database of them, right? What I worry's strong. What I kind of don't think follows the style is I've got my Excel spreadsheet with 792 secrets in it, and now I got to figure out which of those secrets I want to play out. And it's like that. It can become paralyzing. Right. To try to keep old secrets and worry about them, and instead throwing them away and then coming up with new ones, even if the new ones are, there's still that same one I'm drawing over. Not only that, but I will bring over secrets that I know the characters have already heard, just to make sure they remember, just the players remember it, right? And if they say like, yeah, we already heard that, right? Okay, that's fine. Like this guy is reinforcing the fact that, so that's I think it's. People tend not to want to throw stuff away, so they worry about the old ones, and that's why I don't have like a database. It's not like in Notion I have a database of I have them all. I could actually go back and look at old secrets for every one that I've run, but I don't. I will look at the old ones to say like, hey, which ones did I reveal? Almost as kind of like an interesting side bit. But I tend not to worry about last week's secrets in the same way I don't worry about the secrets for 2 sessions from now, right? Like there's one game. It is the next one we play. The ones we played are done, and the ones that we have in the future.
And if they don't play out and whatever, it's still good creative exercise. Keep your mind sharp. Yeah. When you're thinking creatively, when you're creating ideas, that spawns more ideas. And so if anything, it's good exercise.
Yeah, I think, and so Shane is mentioning that sometimes I come up with a pretty good one, and I selfishly want to keep them, and it's like you will. Right? If it's really that good, you'll remember it. Right? You're not going to lose that, And this is like, I think Stephen King talked about this. He's like, I don't really keep notes. Like, I'll take notes, but I don't really go back and look at it because good ideas come back. And some people are like, oh my God, that's the worst thing. Like, Well, I'm pretty sure I'm not alone in the fact that like even my game notes, I rarely reference them after I've written them, even during a game.
I honestly, I don't think I've written a single game note in the last 2 years that I've been playing with this campaign.
It's interesting. Yeah. So I do. I have my Notion page where I go through the steps, and it's nice to have it. And now it's a Notion, I can link stuff. So if I have my list of monsters, they all link to monsters, and I'll
just fake it. And if they're like, we want to go back to that town and find that one guy. What was that? Who was that guy again? I don't know. What do you remember about that guy? and if they don't remember, then I'll make it up. And if it's different, then
I make up a new name, and they're like, no, that's not it. And like,
well, right, that's what,
like none of us can remember. But
that's why I asked them first, because I figure if you don't know, then whatever I say has got to be right. So, all right,
that's when I start reusing NPCs throughout different campaigns, and everyone's like, oh, it's that person, and I'm like, yeah great. I only have to remember like.
Reusing NPCs is a great idea.
Well, we are quickly approaching my bedtime, so I've got to get out early tomorrow morning. So it's time to go. Thank you, everybody in the chat, for joining us. This was fun.
Yep. Thank you, Twitch folk.
I hope you enjoyed yourselves.
Ismail, thanks for coming tonight. It was awesome. Awesome having you.
100%. Absolutely.
Very impressed.